NSFW, what was your I can't believe I just witnessed that moment. I was at a music festival, and saw a car straight up back up over a girl. She got from under the car and said, "Whoa, I've never been hit by a car before." That reaction sounds like it was on her bucket list. Waiting at a bus stop once, I saw a black crow pick up a baby rabbit and fly to a tree, tearing it up and eating it, fur flying everywhere. Then an acquaintance walked by and flipped us off and immediately tripped on her flip-flops and fell right on her face. Weird morning. I saw a cat playing with a mouse on the sidewalk. Legit just playing with each other. I've seen cats playing with mice, but the mice never seem into it. Saw a car driving slowly yet unsteadily down a parking lot, turns right, taps a parked car, and reverses into a spot, scraping another car and tapping a car at the other side. The car switches off and a kid, about 8 years old, gets out of the car. I still don't know the events that lead up to that, but boy would I love to know. He was on his way to buy a Lamborghini. I was in Australia. Sat down at a table and one of our German friends came to sit with us. He poured some Weedos in a bowl. He then looked for some milk and couldn't find it, so he just casually poured some orange juice in the bowl of Weedos and started eating like it was perfectly normal. Disgusting. A bowl of what? We were in class in 10th grade reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and the teacher asks, "What hangs from oak trees?" And the white guy in the class says the N-word. Was the answer supposed to be acorns? Not anything crazy, but my cousin and I were at Walmart and out of nowhere someone yells, "You ever see a black leprechaun before?" We turn around to see a black guy with a green leprechaun hat and orange sideburns. As a matter of fact, we hadn't until that day. How about a black Scottish cyclops? I was at a rave tent and a music festival, looking around for my mate. I turned around and saw a girl get her out, and she opened a can of beer with a piercing on her nipple. My answer is serious. You have been warned. I watched someone die the other day. I'm in the National Guard and working at a hospital for the COVID-19 relief efforts. I watched as a woman, presumably in her late 80s, came in sitting up and talking, and over the course of an hour and a half I watched as she deteriorated. They brought her back to life 4 times. I couldn't take my eyes off of it. After the 4th time, the doc said if she doesn't stabilize after this, we have to call it. There's a reason for it, but I won't disclose it here. I watched her die because of COVID-19. It was powerful. I felt so helpless. I just wanted to do something, but there was nothing I could do. The professionals worked like mad to keep her alive, and if they couldn't do it, what could I do? All I could do is watch and utter awe of how hard these nurses, EMTs, and doctors work. I have a whole new appreciation for emergency center staff now. It was a humbling experience. Side note, the head nurse gave me permission to watch as long as I wasn't in the way. She said if I just wanted to take it all in and see how they work, it was okay. That's intense. Hope you're okay. Saw a guy drink beer off of a girl's once. Can you please explain more? I was driving on a cloudy day, and up ahead of me, a B-2 bomber came out of a cloud to the left, crossed the road, and flew into a cloud on the right. It was banking, so the silhouette was real clear. I checked later and there was an air show at the nearby Air Force Base. Semi-truck crossing lanes on the highway, headed straight for me. I swerved into the oncoming lane to get around him and back into mine as he passed, then I pulled to the side and watched him barrel into the ditch at 110 kilometers per hour. That truck got bounced around like you wouldn't believe. I have no idea how it stayed upright, but I could see the driver being tossed around the cab until it stopped. Went to check on him. He had fallen asleep and had a rude awakening. Yikes. Glad everyone was okay. This is straight out of my nightmares. We had a trampoline when I was a teenager. One day out in our yard, I threw a mini frisbee towards my friend, who quickly bent down, grabbed a wiffle ball bat, took an awkward, one-handed forehand swing and made pretty good contact, but since it was a frisbee, it still went up like a pop fly. I thought I could catch it, but it sailed over my head on the way down and fell between the springs of the trampoline. A pretty incredible shot, since the pads covered most of the springs. We looked at each other with the same look and idea on our faces. Thus, trampoline hockey was born. It was basically air hockey, but played with that frisbee and a couple plastic, handle-less oars. To my amazement, my dad and his after-work friends thought the whole concept was pretty cool, and upgraded our frisbee to a milk cap filled with BBs and wrapped in black electrical tape before joining in. It sucked to get hit in the knuckles with. We played that game off and on for 2 years before it faded out. That sounds lit. I know what I'm doing for my future kids. When I was 15, I was in this little local candy store that sold antiques upstairs. I had bought myself a milkshake and was sitting at the counter talking to the owner. That's when this mom bursts in with her little daughter, probably like 4 or 5. The mom was screaming that her kid was choking and I shot up freaking out. The owner jumped over the counter and was trying to help. The girl was almost unconscious. But then this really tall black guy who I recognized had been painting the building across the street burst through the door and picked up the little girl and held her a certain way until she started coughing and crying. The mom was like super thankful and the owner ended up giving him a free milkshake since it was a hot July day. Then he just went back to painting and I just remember being like, cause I was shook for the rest of the day. About 20 years ago, I was sitting in morning traffic in my hometown, and this idiot on a crotch rocket tried to pass everyone by driving in the narrow lane between cars and the sidewalk. He's zipping along illegally, and just as I'm saying to myself, this dumbass is gonna get nailed, another car right in front of me took a left-hand turn through the line of cars and straight into the crotch rocket. Flew off the bike, somersaulting in the air, fully aerial. Crotch rocket went crunch instantly. The kid was fine. A few scrapes, but he was wearing a helmet and decent leather. But he was fully weeping, my bike, as though it wasn't completely his fault. The kid is so lucky to be alive. I couldn't believe he just got up and walked over to the wreck to weep over the pile of rubber and iron. And we're all just sitting in traffic staring at this dumbass. I saw my neighbor getting shot at and then bleeding on the sidewalk. This is no fun. A daylight smash and grab robbery. I was sitting in a department store parking lot in my truck sending a text message, when out of the corner of my eye I saw a swift movement and heard glass shattering. A man in sunglasses and gloves, with a hoodie cinched up tight around his face, had smashed the passenger window of the car next to me with a pry bar, and started trying to pry open the glove box. Eventually the lock broke and the man rummaged around, grabbed something, and hopped back into his car, which was parked on the other side of the burglarized vehicle. The whole thing took under 15 seconds, I'm sure, but it seemed much longer than that. I waited for the shopper, who owned the car, to come out of the store and told him everything I witnessed, including the make model of the getaway car and the plate number. He didn't speak much English and was pretty distraught. I waited for the cops with him and they took a report, but as far as I know nothing ever came of it. The license plates were stolen, and the getaway car probably was too. Turns out the guy who got ripped off was a crew boss for a drywall company. He had around $12,000 cash inside an envelope, which he had stupidly locked inside his glove box. He had just withdrawn the cash from a bank a half hour before the robbery to pay his workers. Cops believe a crew of thieves at the bank, possibly with help from a bank employee, knew about his withdrawal, marked him for robbery, and followed him until the opportunity presented itself. I was cycling 10 miles home late one night. I was about 17 to 18 when I heard a helicopter flying circles at the top of a hill without its collision lights on. As I got near to this hill I started flashing SOS with my torch. I got to the top of the hill and this helicopter landed inside an high security radio station compound. A crew member slid open the side door and stuck his head out. I cycled up to the gate and had my jaw wide open, quickly realized I had probably broke the law and cycled as fast as I could away. I was in line for the Anne Frank Museum in Amsterdam, and a dude fell back off his bike. First part of him to connect with the ground was the back of his head. Immediately he lets out a worst groan I've ever heard, and begins seizing. People rush over to put something between the ground and his head. When they went to lift him, his head looked like a dropped watermelon. You know, the kind where it holds together, but doesn't hold its shape. Fluid leaking from the cracks in the shell. Yeah, except it was a man's head. Then I went through the Anne Frank Museum. Oof. I saw a man jump from a high-rise in Beijing. I did my study abroad in Beijing, and on my last full day some friends and I were going to pick up a few more souvenirs. We chose a particular route to the bus stop because we'd pass by our favorite restaurant. Unfortunately it was closed, so we continued down the street, which was all high-rise, gated apartments on the left side. One building had a particularly ornate gate and it always caught my eye. That day, as I looked to the left to admire the gate, a woman on a bicycle was passing through the pedestrian portion of the gate. She closed the gate, got on her bike and began to pedal. At that moment something flashed above me and I looked up to see a man crashing to the ground. He missed the woman on the bike by inches. My friends began to scream. The woman on the bike raced away and I called 120 for an ambulance. I was sure the man was dead, but then he had what appeared to be a seizure. I could not see him quite clearly from the gate, but I could see obviously broken legs and some blood from head trauma. Then a security guard came rushing from behind the building. I told him an ambulance was coming, and as the guard approached the man on the ground, he magically reached out to the guard and spoke. My friends were still hysterical and they wanted to leave, so I told them I'd meet them at the market. I waited until the ambulance came, but the EMTs kind of shooed me away. So I left, but I had so many questions. I thought about that man for a long time after I came home. His trajectory meant that he absolutely did not fall. He jumped or was pushed. What floor did he jump from? When I noticed him falling, it was at least the 14th floor level, maybe higher. Was he trying to hit the woman on the bike, or was that just a coincidence? And lastly, did he live? I read the Beijing newspapers for weeks after, but never saw any mention of an accident at that address. I will never know what happened. A F4 tornado crossed the road 1/2 mile ahead of me. What was that like? Probably scary AF. I was on a very busy subway, and it was one of those stations that pretty much everyone gets. Often it's a chaos since everyone is trying to walk to the exit. Well, I was with a friend and we were one of the last ones to get off. I see this girl who is eating a candy-covered marshmallow, took a bite, and I guess she didn't like it, so she threw it away in one of the clear trash bags near the stairs and proceeds to leave. Well, this random, normal-looking guy comes over, doesn't even look around, reaches into the trash bag and pulls out the 10% eaten marshmallow and eats it there and continues on his way. It all happened in like a span of 30 seconds, and I still sometimes think it was maybe me hallucinating. Except my friend saw it too.